After dinner, Olivia went upstairs with her big bag. Vincent didn't care what the hell she was doing and stayed quietly in his study reading a book. Ever since Olivia showed up and messed up his life, his mood had been getting unsteady, which wasn't a good sign. He needed to do some time-consuming events to settle down like he had been doing before, for example, reading and practicing his handwriting. Ding! Wisnovel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. After a while, someone knocked on the door. Vincent looked up and saw Olivia peeking through the door and asked him, "Would it bother you if I was here? I'm quiet. You can leave me alone." Vincent was silent for a few seconds and gave a curt response. Olivia got permission to push open the study door and then came in with a huge soaking tub. Even if Vincent is being so matter-of-fact, he was also startled by her bizarre behavior. Olivia brought the heavy soaking tub to Vincent's feet, crouched at his feet, opened the lid, and looked up to see him. "Put your feet in it." Vincent looked at the black water in the foot tub and looked disgusted. "What is it?" "I have put herbal packets in it. Such medicine will help your leg heal." "Where did you get it?" "I went to see Dr. Clark this afternoon." Olivia specifically went to visit Andrew Clark to inquire about the care for Vincent's leg problem. Dr. Clark kindly gave her a long piece of paper filled with notes and some things to do on a regular basis. Then she followed the content and bought a big bag of tools and medicine to bring here. She had promised Vincent she would fix his leg. Anyway, she would keep her word. He's a quack. Don't pay any attention to his words, Vincent said indifferently. Olivia saw that Vincent was so resistant to the treatment. She turned to believe more in what Andrew said, and she stressed, "You promised to receive my therapy." Vincent sighed as he remembered that bet. Looking down at the basin of black water, he swallowed his revulsion. "Go ahead, what should I do?" Vincent usually wore a pair of thin cotton slippers barefoot at home. At this point, Olivia had no problem removing his slippers, rolling up his pant legs, lifting his legs, and placing his feet in the foot tub inside. The water inside was on the hot side. Vincent subconsciously wanted to lift his foot but then thought that his legs and feet were numb, so he had to endure to stay inside. Olivia looked at the time and said, "Soak for half an hour. Dr. Clark has said that the hot water will speed up the blood circulation and allow the medicine to work better." Vincent didn't like the heat at all. Being a man young and energetic, he couldn't use all the extra energy he had on weekdays. Nevertheless, at the moment he had to soak his feet in hot water. He just felt like he was starting to get hot all over, and there were signs of sweating. Vincent's eyebrows showed impatient and irritated, but when he saw that Olivia was squatting next to him with a serious face and adding herbs to the hot water every now, he closed his eyes. "Never mind, just bear with it for half an hour." Vincent picked up the book on the table and continued reading, trying to ignore Olivia as best he could. Olivia saw him reading. Curiously, she stretched her neck to take a look. As a result, she couldn't even understand which language the book was in. She had heard grandfather say once that Vincent was fluent in several languages, and now it seemed to be true. The wait wasn't idle as Olivia picked up one of the extraordinarily old-looking books she'd brought over without a cover. Then she read the book very carefully. Half an hour was up and Olivia put the book down. "Time's up." Vincent was going crazy. He was hot to the extreme, and he wasn't allowed to turn on the air conditioner. So when he thought he was finally relieved and used his hands to put his legs lifted out of the foot tub, Olivia moved a chair to his side. He froze. "What are you going to do?" Olivia replied, "I still have to give you a massage. Otherwise, your legs will atrophy if you don't use them for a long time. I usually have exercise." He didn't need a massage from her. "That's different. You exercise all the upper body, but what about the lower body?" Vincent raised an eyebrow and said meaningfully, "Who says I don't work out my lower body?" Was she thinking that the one working hard in bed would be her? Olivia grew to hear the deep meaning, her cheeks flushed, and glared at him as if she hadn't heard him. She moved up his legs and placed them on her own. She had a series of preparations. She squeezed clear massage cream on her own hands, rubbing it hot before pressing it on him. With warm hands on his calves, Vincent just felt more blood pumping at this point than the time he'd just soaked his feet. The power wasn't strong, but it was like tickling his heart. Now he couldn't even read the book to distract his attention. Yet a certain woman, still unaware of herself, curiously massaged up again and said in surprise, "Your leg, unlike the words in the book, feels like having muscular." It seemed hard and one could still see the lines. Vincent didn't bother to respond to Olivia. She didn't take it seriously because she had not studied medicine. Maybe people were different in symptoms. Vincent's eyes moved over the book Olivia had just been reading before she pressed down on the table with her hand. He stretched his arm out and took it over. After reading the contents, it was as if his heart had taken a punch. The book was a kind of explanation about leg acupuncture points. That was a book that looked dated at first glance, filled with dense commentary and notes. It should be quite precious, and he didn't know where she got it from. For his leg, she was really taking it seriously. Olivia carefully massaged him, and although the strength and the way she did it were unprofessional, the acupuncture points she applied to were all right. After a long time, a thin layer of sweat broke out on her tired forehead. Vincent could tell that she wanted him to get up, and a corner of his heart turned to be fragile. Suddenly, with her head down, Olivia thought of something and emphasized, "The deal is, if you are cured, you have to grant grant my wish." This was the word that broke the charming atmosphere. Vincent wore a cold look and threw the book back on the table. Olivia's timing was well controlled, ending today's session in an hour. Vincent was already hot enough to unbutton the top few buttons of his shirt, revealing his sexy collarbone and chest with sleeves pulled up to his elbows. Olivia was momentarily dumbfounded, and when she realized she was committing a flirtation, her eyes met Vincent's gaze with a bit of teasing. She licked her lips and acted as if nothing had happened. "Ahem, that's enough for today. I'll be back tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Yeah, it takes a long time. You need daily foot soak, leg massage, and regular rehabilitation," Olivia replied with a nod. Vincent quirked an eyebrow because he found that he had to go through this procedure every night. Olivia gathered her things in silence and took a deep breath, preparing for a long time before trying to speak. "Are you free on Saturday? I'm going with you to see the doctor," Vincent asked sharply. "What doctor?" Olivia was surprised at Vincent's sensitivity. She fidgeted and said, psychologist." Vincent's face went cold, and then he was fully aware. So Andrew was targeting Olivia, and let her convince him. "I've collected the information. It's not uncommon that people in this situation are more or less psychologically frustrated, but this expert is famous." Vincent interrupted her coldly, showing his emotional baseline in front of her. "I might work with you in therapy, but for one thing, psychiatrist, I won't be there." He looked down to cover his disappointment and spoke with a bit of insistence. "I'm fine." The conversation ended silently. For the first time, Olivia felt exactly how disgusted Vincent was with this thing. She sighed. He had promised her that he would receive the treatment, so it shouldn't be a big thing for him to see a psychiatrist or not. After Olivia left the study, Vincent lit a cigarette between his fingers, obviously in a bad mood. But a short while later, Olivia came running back in a panic, looking at him with a hard look on her face. "My room? How come it turned into clutter room?" Gbert had been prepared for this when he was called over. Standing in the doorway of Olivia's room, Gbert looked at his masterpiece and had a hard time explaining to the second master and madam. "This is all the idea of Master Barton. I have just done what I was told." "Then, I'll sleep in another room," Olivia said. Gbert shook his head. "Other rooms are not equipped with a bed." Vincent pressed his temples. The message was clear enough. There were eyes in the house. Nothing escaped Grandpa's eyes. He sighed and ordered, "Take her things and move them to my room." "What?" Olivia looked confused. Gbert reacted quickly and cheerfully summoned the servant to carry her things. "In Grandpa's mind, you're going to marry me after graduation. If we're too respectful of each other, it will make Grandpa suspicious," Vincent explained. "Okay," Olivia responded with no choice. She bit her lip. Didn't that mean she would have to share a room with him? A word popped out of her head. Cohabitation. Vincent's room was large and empty for two, and Olivia, hugging her pillow, watched Vincent's bed and finally resigned herself to make a bed on the floor. "Sleep on the bed," Vincent blurted out. When Olivia looked over, he looked away and said carelessly, "I can't make you sleep on the floor. Gbert is prone to find. Anyway, my bed is big." Olivia didn't want to sleep on the floor either, because Vincent's bed was so comfortable to sleep in. She had the large, extravagantly luxurious soft bed that she could roll around on several times. Then she placed her pillow next to Vincent's. She grabbed her pajamas and said, "I'm going to take a shower." It was only after getting into the bathroom and undressing that Olivia started to feel embarrassed. The bathroom was reserved for Vincent's exclusive use and was stocked with all of his groceries. The bathroom smelled the same scent of his body. Vincent stripped down and showered in it every day, and now she was going to strip down and shower too. Olivia shouldered, slapped her face, and berated herself. "What are you thinking about?" It wasn't just Olivia, but Vincent felt odd listening to the sound of running water in the bathroom. It was uncomfortable, but not repulsive. Soon, Olivia came out in her pajamas and stood there awkwardly. Do you want to take a shower?" "Yes." It was a good thing Vincent wasn't going to let Olivia help him in the bathroom. After Olivia put everything within his reach, he let her out. Olivia thought it was strange to share a bed with a man, but even stranger was the fact that after turning off the lights, she felt the man next to her had a powerful presence. She was nothing repulsive instead, and soon she was drowsy. Vincent soon heard Olivia's steady breathing, and he became unhappy in heart at this point. Did the woman think he was disabled and not dangerous at all? Or she did not regard him as a man at all? Either way, it was a huge insult to him. The two of them were supposed to be separate, one on each side. Vincent was so close to falling asleep when Olivia rolled over with half of her body pressing against him. She was dreaming and rubbing his face and legs. Vincent woke up straight away, and he helplessly put his arm on his forehead. He felt his body temperature was rising and rolled his Adam's apple up and down, resisting the urge to turn over and ravish the woman. He regretted that he shouldn't have let her live here. A few more times, he would be gone. Just as the man's self-control was on the verge of collapsing, Olivia unknowingly added to his passion and breathed hot air into the nape of his neck. Vincent closed his eyes. Olivia, you asked for it. He grabbed her arms and rolled over, directly blocking the lips in front of him that had made him want to for so long. And without hesitation, his hands went to relieve her of her pajama buttons and invaded her as fast as he could. Olivia felt like she was dreaming. He made her head heavy, her body hot and uncomfortable. She was forced to endure his dominance and possession. In a blur, she saw the outline of the man on her body and recognized Vincent by her instinct and his scent. It was as if time had returned to the day he brutally crushed her, plundering her crazily. The thought of that image made her whole body tremble. As a result, her body ached a lot. It hurts. Vincent, I got hurt. She suddenly began to resist, crying out in a small voice. As she shuddered, she could feel the man on her stiffen suddenly. She went on instinct to push against his body, whimpering and begging, Don't touch me. Vincent looked at her in shock, and gradually his shock turned to remorse. It was a long time before he got up off of her. She didn't mention that day in South Lake Bay anymore, as if she didn't care. She was so optimistic that even he thought she was fine. The old saying has revealed that when the scar is healed, the pain is forgotten. She was that kind, but the truth would be that the sexual affairs, without any tenderness, left a shadow on her. She was still sobbing quietly as if trapped in a nightmare, while he was the executioner who brought her painful experience. I won't touch you. He hugged her, patting her back and coaxing her softly. No touching you. Don't be afraid. Midnight. Olivia sensed something was wrong and waked up suddenly, almost jumping out of bed. Her body moved in this way, but met resistance. Then she looked down and found herself rolling back into Vincent's chest for some reason. His arm was around her waist and one of her legs was on his body. Vincent. Having slept for a short time, Vincent was awakened by Olivia. There was a low pressure around him. He pressed on the bedside lamp impatiently and glared at her with cold eyes. Against Vincent's angry of getting up, Olivia bit her lip in shame. Can you get up for a second? Olivia and Vincent's first night living together was thrilling. In the middle of the night, the servants held their breath in and out, trying their best to keep their eyes in the right direction, and changed the bedspread skillfully. Olivia, who had already changed clothes and taken her tampon before the servants arrived, she stood in the corner, covering her belly and lowering her presence as much as she could. Andy stood by, hesitant and hard-headed, and reminded, Second master, aren't you going to change your pants? That big blood tub was so noticeable. The second master and madam must have slept so intimately at night to get such a big stain. Vincent hadn't even responded yet. Olivia was keeping her head down, already feeling the urge to die, and she felt like that in her life she had never been so humiliated. Why the amount so high on the first day of her period? It didn't matter that she soiled the sheets, but she actually stained Vincent's pajama pants, still on the thigh piece. Vincent didn't even bother to say anything, his fingers on his temples, his hoarse voice throwing out two words. Get out. Yes, sir. The group of servants left. When the room quieted down, Vincent scanned the lady in the corner. How long are you going to face the wall there? You change clothes and I'll wash your pants, Olivia stammered. Vincent looked down at his misery and her little face, which was white because of her period. He raised his chin towards the bed. Go to bed, he said, and turned his wheelchair to change. Olivia was a little startled as she lay in bed. It was like she had a dream where she was crying, and he was coaxing her very gently. The bathroom door opened and Olivia looked over. Vincent was wearing a cold face as if he had come out of an ice cellar. She snorted on the sly. Only a dream could be so detached from reality. Every time Olivia had her period, on the first day, she had painful menstrual cramps that made her impossible to sleep. She wanted to toss and turn, but was afraid of disturbing the man next to her. Vincent sensed her irritation and placed a large hand over her open eyes. He coldly urged, Sleep. It hurts. Olivia whispered with her hand pressed against her abdomen. He opened his eyes and understood her before he realized what she was saying. Vincent had left the country as a teenager, and back then he was educated abroad and taught all the physiology lessons on understanding gender. He pursed his lips and placed his large hand on her abdomen, massaging it gently. The heat of the man's palm dispelled the chill in her body, and he took it with just the right amount of force, so she didn't hurt so much. Olivia was shocked that he would patiently massage her belly. She was rubbed very comfortably and slowly fell asleep. In the morning, when she woke up, Vincent was gone. Olivia went downstairs and saw Gbert preparing breakfast. Gbert saw her and waved. Madam, come and have breakfast. Seeing Olivia looking around, Gbert, as if reading her mind, explained, Something's come up at the office. Second master left early in the morning. Olivia was so embarrassed to hear this. She had kept Vincent almost awake last night, and he had rushed off early in the morning to work. Olivia sat down at the table and was surprised to find a bowl of brown sugar and ginger ale in front of her. Gbert had heard about the event last night and said with a smile, "It was the second master's order." Thinking about last night, Olivia still felt humiliated. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry for the trouble. It doesn't matter. Is Madam well? If you're still uncomfortable, I will arrange the family doctor to take a look." "It's fine. I'm much better already." Olivia waved her hand repeatedly. After dinner, she and Zach played for a while before Zach headed off to school. Zoe had only been settled for a few days after she moved into Church House. She became a bit impatient. She was eager to expand her social network and try to squeeze into the upper class. Jeff was out of the country for a few days. With Robert, the oldest in the family for a while, it was the perfect time for her. At dinner, Zoe carefully served Robert at the table and took Robert's favorites into his plate. She occasionally said things that Robert loved to hear. Compared to Maggie's rebelliousness, Zoe was more sweet and caring. Robert felt that it was a wise decision for Zoe to come back to the church family. As Robert and Maggie chatted, Zoe said innocently, "Dad, I'm so jealous of my sister. She has so many friends, and I don't have any friends. Didn't you have some good friends at school?" Zoe forced a smile. "I'm not as pleasant as my sister. They prefer to play with Sis a little." Robert frowned and rightfully assumed that Maggie's friends were ganging up at school to isolate Zoe. They were both his daughters. Robert smiled reassuringly. "I have a party invitation day after tomorrow. How about Dad taking you to make some friends at your age?" Zoe was surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" "Of course, you're Daddy's daughter too." Robert rightly thought that since his father had agreed to Zoe's living in the quad, he naturally had the idea of acknowledging her. Sooner or later, it didn't matter. Zoe was happy and pressed on to ask, "Will my sister be there?" "Yeah, you'll be a companion with her then. Your sister is a bit prideful. You should understand her. I don't think she's as resistant now as she used to be. She should be taking it easy on you." Zoe was a little unhappy to hear the affirmative answer. She had thought she would be able to be alone with her father, but she still looked happy superficially. "Great." Maggie almost stormed off when she came back with the news, but she remembered Olivia's advice and squashed her fire, nonchalantly returned "I've got it" and went to her room. As soon as she got back to her room, Maggie called Olivia to complain. Olivia listened and asked her, "Is it the party at the rendezvous the day after tomorrow?" Maggie said evenly, "Yeah, you know, I would be there." Olivia said she'd gotten a call from Greg today, and her father had asked her to accompany him to this party. "Really? Fantastic." Maggie was instantly less angry, but happier when she heard that Olivia was going too. Olivia was like a reassurance to her, and with Olivia, she would not be afraid. To attend the party, Olivia had even asked a day off from Vincent. She stayed at Vincent's house most days now, with her time allotted regularly. Every day after dinner, she gave Vincent an hour of therapeutic massage. Then she played with Zach for a while, told him stories to put him to bed, and then did something of her own. Then she would go back to Vincent's bedroom to get ready to wash up and rest. Except for the first day of the accident, she had gotten used to cohabitation life. The two of them in bed were still pretty well behaved. It was so clear that they fell asleep on each side of the bed. But in the morning, when she woke up, she was likely in his arms. In response, Olivia was always careful to withdraw from his arms so that Vincent wouldn't know. Vincent heard that Olivia was going to the party and agreed without thinking. The daily so-called treatments were torture to him. If he didn't know she was serious about giving him a massage, he would have felt like she was doing it on purpose and was seducing him. Her small hands were on his legs, touching, pinching, and bringing him all the passion. She was moving in front of his eyes, visible and touchable, however, impossible to have sex. Vincent felt his patience growing. Every time he couldn't stand it any longer and wanted to just get her laid, he would think of her crying out in pain underneath him that night, and then he would not do that. That night, instead of going to Vincent's house, Olivia went back to the White family. As soon as she got back to her room, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, it was Carol. "Mother," Olivia called politely and distantly. Carrying a large bag, Carol walked into Olivia's room and said cheerfully, "Ollie, tonight, you are going to the rendezvous with your dad. I went shopping afternoon to buy you a new dress. Put on it. Let's see if it fits." Olivia looked at the gorgeous dress and couldn't figure out what was on Carol's mind for a while. Compared to Jessica, who always picked on her, Carol had been very well behaved lately. Things went wrong for a reason. This woman was not that kind. Olivia turned her sight as she happily went to get her dress and asked, "Isn't Mom going to change? Tonight your dad is taking you, so I won't be there and you two have fun. By the way, here's the jewelry. You put it on. Ollie is sure to be the best looking one tonight." Carol acted as a good wife and mother. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Considering the tactics of Carol and Jessica, they must be doing everything they could to stop Olivia from shining at the party. But they didn't even go. Instead, they got her a beautiful dress and jewelry. She didn't know what Carol was scheming, and Olivia could only wait and see what would happen. When Olivia finished the clothes changing and came downstairs, Greg was already waiting for her. He turned his head and saw his beautiful daughter, showing a look of satisfaction. Greg hadn't wanted to bring Olivia to the feast. Olivia and Vincent had been close recently, which Greg was happy to see. He didn't want to interfere interfere with the progress of these two. Instead, Carol came up with the idea that Greg took Olivia to participate in the feast. Greg thought for a second and believed Carol was right. He felt good for Olivia to see more of the world, to save the trouble from looking down on Olivia. So far, only a minority of people knew about Vincent and Olivia's engagement, which kept Greg dissatisfied. The engagement banquet in the first place was extravagant, but the number of guests was extremely small. They just went through the process, and it was over. He had never taken advantage of the Barton family. When Vincent agreed to the marriage, he asked that it not be made public, so Greg couldn't spread the news. It would be a great loss to piss Vincent off. Carol smiled and waved her hand, watching the car drifting away. When she couldn't see it, her smile disappeared and she snorted. Now she was figuring out that Olivia was far from being the good girl she pretended to be. She knew Olivia had many evil ideas and would trick her from time to time. The reason why Carol did nothing to Olivia for a long time was that Carol was waiting for Olivia to get into trouble. Carol thought that Jesse missed Holt's new drama because of Olivia and that Olivia ruined Jesse's reputation. Since she paid out so much money, she would naturally want justice for her daughter. The incident at the last party was like a lighter. Now that Olivia was going to the feast, it seemed that the light would light a bomb. Carol had waited for this bomb to explode. On the way, Olivia looked out the window at the night view, and Greg asked again about her and Vincent. Olivia made a few brief remarks to the improved relationship between Vincent and her, and then, predictably, saw Greg nod in satisfaction. Olivia was in an inexplicably fickle and impatient mood. Greg's question was like a wake-up call, a reminder of how impure her relationship with Vincent had been. She got engaged to him in the first place with the motive of exploiting Vincent's identity, hoping that she could rely on Vincent to make her father treat her well and pave the way for the future. While Vincent was trying to appease his grandfather, she couldn't tell how it felt like, but because of Vincent and Zach, she was getting an illusion that Vincent's place was her home. The car arrived at the rendezvous and Olivia entered on her father's arm. Olivia's exquisite face and appearance naturally became the center of attention, and many people came forward to exchange pleasantries with Greg. Soon after, Olivia received a message from Maggie asking where she was. Olivia sat down at the table and was surprised to find a bowl of brown sugar and ginger ale in front of her. Gbert had heard about the event last night and said with a smile, "It was the second master's order." Thinking about last night, Olivia still felt humiliated. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry for the trouble. It doesn't matter. Is Madam well? If you're still uncomfortable, I will arrange the family doctor to take a look." "It's fine. I'm much better already." Olivia waved her hand repeatedly. After dinner, she and Zach played for a while before Zach headed off to school. Zoe had only been settled for a few days after she moved into Church House. She became a bit impatient. She was eager to expand her social network and try to squeeze into the upper class. Jeff was out of the country for a few days. With Robert, the oldest in the family, for a while, it was the perfect time for her. At dinner, Zoe carefully served Robert at the table and took Robert's favorites into his plate. She occasionally said things that Robert loved to hear. Compared to Maggie's rebelliousness, Zoe was more sweet and caring. Robert felt that it was a wise decision for Zoe to come back to the church family. As Robert and Maggie chatted, Zoe said innocently, "Dad, I'm so jealous of my sister. She has so many friends, and I don't have any friends. Didn't you have some good friends at school?" Zoe forced a smile. "I'm not as pleasant as my sister. They prefer to play with Sis a little." Robert frowned and rightfully assumed that Maggie's friends were ganging up at school to isolate Zoe. They were both his daughters. Robert smiled reassuringly. "I have a party invitation day after tomorrow. How about Dad taking you to make some friends at your age?" Zoe was surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" "Of course, you're Daddy's daughter too." Robert rightly thought that since his father had agreed to Zoe's living in the quad, he naturally had the idea of acknowledging her. Sooner or later, it didn't matter. Zoe was happy and pressed on to ask, "Will my sister be there?" "Yeah, you'll be a companion with her then. Your sister is a bit prideful. You should understand her. I don't think she's as resistant now as she used to be. She should be taking it easy on you." Zoe was a little unhappy to hear the affirmative answer. She had thought she would be able to be alone with her father, but she still looked happy superficially. "Great." Maggie almost stormed off when she came back with the news, but she remembered Olivia's advice and squashed her fire, nonchalantly returned got it, and went to her room. As soon as she got back to her room, Maggie called Olivia to complain. Olivia listened and asked her, "Is it the party at the rendezvous the day after tomorrow?" Maggie said evenly, "Yeah, you know, I would be there." Olivia said she'd gotten a call from Greg today, and her father had asked her to accompany him to this party. "Really? Fantastic." Maggie was instantly less angry, but happier when she heard that Olivia was going too. Olivia was like a reassurance to her, and with Olivia, she would not be afraid. To attend the party, Olivia had even asked a day off from Vincent. She stayed at Vincent's house most days now, with her time allotted regularly. Every day after dinner, she gave Vincent an hour of therapeutic massage. Then she played with Zach for a while, told him stories to put him to bed, and then did something of her own. Then she would go back to Vincent's bedroom to get ready to wash up and rest. Except for the first day of the accident, she had gotten used to cohabitation life. The two of them in bed were still pretty well behaved. It was so clear that they fell asleep on each side of the bed. But in the morning, when she woke up, she was likely in his arms. In response, Olivia was always careful to withdraw from his arms so that Vincent wouldn't know. Vincent heard that Olivia was going to the party and agreed without thinking. The daily so-called treatments were torture to him. If he didn't know she was serious about giving him a massage, he would have felt like she was doing it on purpose and was seducing him. Her small hands were on his legs, touching, pinching, and bringing him all the passion. She was moving in front of his eyes, visible and touchable, however, impossible to have sex. Vincent felt his patience growing. Every time he couldn't stand it any longer and wanted to just get her laid, he would think of her crying out in pain underneath him that night, and then he would not do that. That night, instead of going to Vincent's house, Olivia went back to the White family. As soon as she got back to her room, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, it was Carol. "Mother," Olivia called politely and distantly. Carrying a large bag, Carol walked into Olivia's room and said cheerfully, "Ollie, tonight, you are going to the rendezvous with your dad. I went shopping afternoon to buy you a new dress. Put on it. Let's see if it fits." Olivia looked at the gorgeous dress and couldn't figure out what was on Carol's mind for a while. Compared to Jessica, who always picked on her, Carol had been very well behaved lately. Things went wrong for a reason. This woman was not that kind. Olivia turned her sight as she happily went to get her dress and asked, "I assent, Mom, going to change? Tonight your dad is taking you, so I won't be there and you two have fun. By the way, here's the jewelry. You put it on. Ollie is sure to be the best looking one tonight." Carol acted as a good wife and mother. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Considering the tactics of Carol and Jessica, they must be doing everything they could to stop Olivia from shining at the party. But they didn't even go. Instead, they got her a beautiful dress and jewelry. She didn't know what Carol was scheming, and Olivia could only wait and see what would happen. When Olivia finished the clothes changing and came downstairs, Greg was already waiting for her. He turned his head and saw his beautiful daughter, showing a look of satisfaction. Greg hadn't wanted to bring Olivia to the feast. Olivia and Vincent had been close recently, which Greg was happy to see. He didn't want to interfere with the progress of these two. Instead, Carol came up with the idea that Greg took Olivia to participate in the feast. Greg thought for a second and believed Carol was right. He felt good for Olivia to see more of the world, to save the trouble from looking down on Olivia. So far, only a minority of people knew about Vincent and Olivia's engagement, which kept Greg dissatisfied. The engagement banquet in the first place was extravagant, but the number of guests was extremely small. They just went through the process, and it was over. He had never taken advantage of the Barton family. When Vincent agreed to the marriage, he asked that it not be made public, so Greg couldn't spread the news. It would be a great loss to piss Vincent off. Carol smiled and waved her hand, watching the car drifting away. When she couldn't see it, her smile disappeared and she snorted. Now she was figuring out that Olivia was far from being the good girl she pretended to be. She knew Olivia had many evil ideas and would trick her from time to time. The reason why Carol did nothing to Olivia for a long time was that Carol was waiting for Olivia to get into trouble. Carol thought that Jesse missed Holt's new drama because of Olivia and that Olivia ruined Jesse's reputation. Since she paid out so much money, she would naturally want justice for her daughter. The incident at the last party was like a lighter. Now that Olivia was going to the feast, it seemed that the light would light a bomb. Carol had waited for this bomb to explode. On the way, Olivia looked out the window at the night view, and Greg asked again about her and Vincent. Olivia made a few brief remarks to the improved relationship between Vincent and her, and then, predictably, saw Greg nod in satisfaction. Olivia was in an inexplicably fickle and impatient mood. Greg's question was like a wake-up call, a reminder of how impure her relationship with Vincent had been. She got engaged to him in the first place with the motive of exploiting Vincent's identity, hoping that she could rely on Vincent to make her father treat her well and pave the way for the future. While Vincent was trying to appease his grandfather, she couldn't tell how it felt like, but because of Vincent and Zach, she was getting an illusion that Vincent's place was her home. The car arrived at the rendezvous and Olivia entered on her father's arm. Olivia's exquisite face and appearance naturally became the center of attention, and many people came forward to exchange pleasantries with Greg. Soon after, Olivia received a message from Maggie asking where she was. Olivia beat her like a crazy person, reckless and innocent. She even helped her rely on this incident to live in the church family. Zoe thought that as expected, people were divided into groups and Maggie's friends couldn't be that smart. Thinking nothing of this, Zoe figured out Maggie's place and walked over to her. Maggie was talking to friends. An oil tycoon's daughter had invited her to go to Paris for a time to enjoy the fashion week, and a plutocrat's sister had invited all those girls including her to a cruise party. Zoe was envious after just hearing a few words. These things were out of reach for her before, but it was okay. Later, she would enjoy these things. Zoe raised her smile, walked over to Maggie and said gently and innocently, "Sister, I know you ate nothing before, so I have got you some food, see if you like it." To show how careful she was, Zoe took some of everything and brought a plate over. When Maggie saw Zoe, she didn't care much, dropping her sight over the plate and eating a piece of dragon fruit with a toothpick tied into it. Zoe was happy to see her collaboration. Maggie looked to some of her friends friends and gestured to the plate. "Are you guys hungry? Enjoy some food." These ladies carefully picked food and enjoyed themselves gracefully. Slowly, Zoe couldn't force a smile. As she carried the tray, the others ate, making her look like a servant. Taking a deep breath, she handed the tray to the waitress, who happened to be passing by, and intimately went to take Maggie's arm. "Maggie, these girls are so pretty. There are so many beautiful girls in our school, but none of them are as good looking as you." Everyone was fond of hearing compliments, and several people smiled, lately paying attention to Zoe. "Maggie, this is the daughter of?" Girls who played well like them called each other sis, so Zoe called Maggie sis. But they had never thought Zoe would be Maggie's sister. Zoe was about to say something when Maggie went ahead and said, "My mom recognizes her as a nominal foster daughter. Not a famous daughter, just a little foster daughter." Ah, the ladies instantly lost the idea of befriending with her, and started to continue talking about what they had just said. Zoe gritted her teeth but couldn't say anything. After a while, Maggie scanned the time and said to Zoe, "It's a little stuffy here. Why don't you come outside with me for a walk?" Zoe was surprised, not knowing what Maggie wanted to do, but followed her out anyway. Outside the courtyard, Maggie was standing by the rose bushes, with the moonlight spilling down and reflecting the fine light on her gown. Zoe looked at Maggie's gown and was surprised to see the delicacy that made her dress attractive. The large hem of the dress was encrusted with tiny diamonds, not visible in the brightly lit ballroom, but at night it looked like a sea of stars, noble and dazzling. This dress was customized and given by Lacey after her previous overseas trip. In comparison, Zoe looked like a humble ugly duckling. Zoe's heart was filled with discontent. She was overjoyed to receive the dress from her father and thought it was extremely beautiful. Compared to Maggie's dress, hers was nothing. Maggie saw through Zoe's fire and despised her. With a serious look, she said, "I bring you out to ask you." "What is it?" Zoe asked with little concern. "I heard that you gave Nick many days of breakfast, prepared elaborate gifts, and wrote him a love letter before you became his girlfriend," Maggie said. She was full of anger, gritting her teeth, and asked, "Why would I feel like these things are familiar?" Zoe's face changed when she heard Maggie's first words, and she opened her mouth, playing confused. "Well, what?" Maggie laughed in exasperation. "You deny it, okay, so tell me, what did you give Nick for breakfast, and what gifts did you give him?" These questions left Zoe speechless. She didn't know, of course. If she hadn't seen Maggie's dorm door open that day and peeked in to see the love letter lying on the desk, she didn't even know about Maggie's love for Nick. At that time, she had an idea and took a picture of the love letter, copying it first, and giving it to Nick before Maggie sent it out. That was how she became ungrateful to her. Maggie resisted the urge to slap Zoe a few times and said aggressively, "Can't come up with it? I'm telling you, the first breakfast was rice balls with liver and ham, the second meal was a sandwich. The first gift was a sports bracelet, and the last gift was one lighter with his initials on it. You have impersonated me in front of Nick and stayed with him for so long time. You even dare to say you are my sister to many friends. Why didn't I know that my mother gave birth to you? However, you're just an illegitimate daughter, making so many lies. Aren't you even afraid of the day you'll be exposed?" Zoe was forced to be annoyed. "Anyway, what Nick likes now is me, not you. So what? I'm a bastard daughter, but I belong to the church family. What makes you think I'm not a member of the church family? What you have should be half of mine." At that moment, a voice came from a tree not far away. "So, what you told me are all lies?" Zoe turned around. When she saw Nick, her whole body looked as if struck by lightning. Nick took 2 steps back and looked at Zoe incredulously, not wanting to believe that the simple and lovely girlfriend he was dating was a scheming bitch. He blinked and set his eyes on Maggie, who was, quite frankly, prettier than Zoe. Maggie was much better looking than Zoe under the moonlight. Maggie's facial features looked more elegant and delicate, while Zoe's were more feminine and weak. Zoe always showed that she was bullied by her sister, so he gradually had little affection for Maggie. But just now, listening to Maggie's accusations and Zoe's words, it felt like his heart was blooding. Maggie saw all of Nick's reactions in her eyes and saw that Zoe was so panicked that she didn't know what to do. Her anger that had been blocked in her heart faded away. Regardless of what Nick thought of her, Maggie was content to expose Zoe's true side in front of him. Nick lost his mind that he looked at Zoe with disappointment and turned his head away. Nick, you listen to me." Zoe panicked and chased after him. Olivia let a waiter lead Nick here and then hid in the shadows, satisfied with how things were going. When she saw the two of them walk away, she walked over to Maggie and gave her 5 on the sly. Maggie didn't know the words to describe Olivia, patting her on the shoulder, and squeezed a word. "You're so amazing." With Olivia's help, Maggie managed to revenge. Zoe didn't finish her playbook well. Olivia just laughed. She wasn't going to set up Maggie and Nick, despite revealing Zoe in front of Nick. In her eyes, Nick was still not good enough for Maggie. In the first half of the party, Olivia helped Maggie chase Zoe away, and in the second half, she stayed with Greg. Greg came here tonight with a very important purpose. He was going to deal with Dunn. Dunn and the director of the Bureau of Land Resources acted as brothers-in-law. They kept in touch with each other from time to time. For that piece of land in the west of the city, Greg put a lot of effort and was bound to win. Many companies were aiming at that piece of land, and Dunn was particularly popular that night. People kept coming up to talk to him. him. Greg found a window time to go with Olivia and greet Dunn. Dunn was a bit tired and didn't want to deal with Greg, but the moment he saw Olivia, his eyes burst with amazement. He kept an eye on Olivia from head to toe and volunteered to greet Greg. "Is this your daughter?" "Oh, this is my younger daughter, Olivia." Greg pushed Olivia forward. "Ollie, say hello." Olivia was uncomfortable being looked at by Dunn, so she had to endure an impatient smile and nod. "Mr. Bush, nice to meet you. I've never seen you before. You're still a student, right?" Dunn smiled and asked Olivia. He had heard that Greg had an illegitimate daughter who had appeared at the banquet some time ago and was said to be gorgeous. At a glance today, he was convinced of her beautifulness at last. "Yes, I'm a junior now. Which school are you in?" "The University of Y." Dunn clearly showed a keen interest in Olivia, and Greg wasn't stupid. Greg looked at Olivia thoughtfully and took the opportunity to bring up the matter of the land. Dunn was sloppy and said, "I heard it is next month's bidding. The rest is unclear." "Oh, right, my daughter and Ollie are the same age. You can come to my house and play with her if you're convenient." Before Olivia could say anything, Maggie appeared from elsewhere and grabbed Olivia by her arm, saying, "There you are. I've been looking for you. Mr. White, can I take Olivia with me? I want to take her to meet some friends." Greg naturally wouldn't refuse and nodded with a kind face. Maggie was busy pulling Olivia away. After walking away, Maggie seriously advising Olivia, "That done, you need to be careful and stay away from him." Olivia kept calm and asked, "What's wrong?" Maggie looked around and whispered to Olivia, "It's not good to say bad things about elders, but he has a poor reputation. It is said he has some eccentricities, likes flirting with schoolgirls. Once he seemed to have gotten someone killed and handled it with money." Dunn often had company business dealings with Robert and Lacey had instructed Maggie not to contact Dunn. Olivia's face went cold when she heard this. What Carol was up to, she probably guessed. Zoe chased Nick along the way to the parking lot. Nick ignored her shouting, opened the door to get in, and started the car to go away. Zoe got a hard look in her eye and stopped in front of the car. The car drove a little forward and knocked her to the ground. Nick didn't expect Zoe's lifeless action. His face went white and he got off the car. "How are you? Are you hurt?" Zoe had tears in her eyes and looked aggrieved. She took advantage of the situation that Nick was squatting in front of her and hugged his waist, crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know what I did was too much for you to accept, but I was just too much in love with you to be obsessed. Will you forgive me?" Nick pursed his lips and looked at Zoe's tear. He felt sorry for her as he had thought about accompanying Zoe all the lifetime, but for the moment, she was not an acceptable member of the church family. Even becoming his girlfriend was a trick. If Zoe hadn't interfered, he would be with Maggie now. The simple-minded girl he had fallen for was Maggie. Thinking of this, Nick ruthlessly got away with Zoe's hand. "Since you're fine, go back to the banquet hall." Nick stood up and drove around Zoe to leave. Zoe sat on the floor, with her hands clenched and her eyes all full of sad and angry. This time together, Zoe had fallen in love with Nick, and this stolen love, she was enjoying it. She had already planned her future. Since she had already entered the church family, after some time, she could have her father and Nick's parents meet and engage Nick. But that were all spoiled by Maggie. Although the Corver family was not that famous, inferior to the White family, let alone to the church family, but Nick had a younger sister who was now living in the London household. She had been Hugo's child bride. Hugo had been the young owner of the Star Entertainment, and with Hugo's help, Nick's future was prosperous. Zoe might also go viral through the Star Entertainment. She was impossible to get any help from the church family to become a star. She wanted to stand out, and Nick would her only chance. She absolutely would take it. As soon as Greg and Olivia got home, Carol greeted them, picked up Greg's suit jacket, and graciously asked Olivia, "Ollie, how was the party? Did you come across anything interesting?" "Nothing interesting, but the pastries at the party were pretty good," Olivia said happily. Carol held back a snort. No matter how scheming Carol was, she was still clown-like since she was so happy when she met some delicious food. She turned and asked Greg, "Did you see Dunn? What did he say?" Greg stopped suddenly while undoing his watch, then responded as if nothing had happened. "Well, we talked for a while, and then he asked me to join him to have a cup of tea in the compartment." Greg looked to Olivia. "Ollie, come to my study when you're dressed." Carol was pleased. Olivia looked subdued. "Fine." She went back to her room to change out of her dress and went to Greg's study. Greg was looking at a file when he noticed her come in and waved his hand. "Sit down," Greg said. Olivia had just sat down when Greg put the file in front of her. "This contract, you find a way to make the Vincent signed it." Her lips pursed as she picked up the contract and roughly flipped through it. Greg only thought she was flipping it over for fun, but the truth was, Olivia had learned and she could read it. This contract was a drawn-up document that would benefit White in every way. Vincent was not a fool. Even if she put a document like this in front of him, how could he sign it? Olivia asked, "Dad, I'm still in school and I know nothing about work. If I rashly ask him to sign, it will make him resentful. I don't care about the process. Ollie, since you're my daughter, you'll do what you can to help me out, won't you? But he and I just got engaged. You have said his grandfather likes you a lot, right? You can also just take it to Eric." Olivia finally knew what it meant meant to move a stone against her own feet. As Greg thought about what Dunn had said tonight, his eyes spoke out his struggle. But when he thought about the future of his company and the White family, he looked firm and said slowly, "Ollie, Dad has a very important project, and there are a lot of opponents now. If the Barton family would help, it would be a handful. However, I sent Vincent a check earlier, and he returned it unopened. It didn't work. I'll have to find another way." Signing a contract and providing funds, Vincent shouldn't be too stingy. Olivia's pupils constricted, not expecting Greg to behave like this. Vincent hadn't mentioned this to her. What did he think of her in his mind? Greg continued, "If you're not sure about Vincent, there's a second option now. As you can see, Dunn is very interested in you. He's a very important person for me. If you can spend some days with him making him happy, this contract can be signed by Vincent." Even though she had been prepared for this, even though she had figured out Carol's ruse, when she heard her father saying these words, her whole body was cold from head to toe, and she could hardly breathe. Her heart was as if fallen into a deep cave of ice. She saw only interest in Greg's eyes. Facing the company and the power, Greg thought Olivia had nothing strengths he could take advantage of. He only saw her as a pawn. Useful pawns stay and useless pawns throw away, right? Greg didn't dare to look Olivia in the eye, and it didn't feel good to use Olivia, so he turned his face away, with his hand picking up the cup of tea beside him and pretending to take a few sips. Olivia was icy cold to the point of numbness. "I'm engaged to Vincent, aren't I? $200 million in the contract would not satisfy your greed? How long were you going to use me for your benefit?" At Olivia's words, Greg was unhappy and he snorted. "Yes, engaged. And then? Vincent didn't allow the news of your engagement to go public. Now he doesn't even want to help me fight for a piece of land. It's clear that he's not taking the marriage seriously at all." Greg stood up and looked at the unsettled Olivia. He felt a little regret, but finally said forcefully, for the sake of his future, "Don't worry, Dunn has a family, so naturally he'll meet you very secretively. This won't be known, and neither will Vincent know that. You'll still be his fiancé for a long while." Olivia regained her look. "Dad, don't worry, I'll make you happy." After returning to her room, Olivia's face immediately went cold. Even if no one cared about her, she would never let anyone ravish her. Two choices, right? She had to come up with a third one. Olivia got a call from her father while she was at school. Greg didn't say much, but just a simple sentence. "Olivia, you and Dunn will have dinner at 8:30 of the night after tomorrow, the South Resort." South Resort is a lodge for vocation on the outskirts of the city. Olivia acted like a scoffer, but her tone was as usual. "Got it, Dad." On the appointed day, Olivia took a leave of absence from Vincent beforehand. Then she took the car that Greg had assigned and arrived at the South Resort at the appointed time. When she got to the booth, Greg and Dunn were taking up the wine cup and chatting merrily. As soon as Dunn saw her, his eyes glowed. "Olivia's coming. Come on, sit down." Olivia hid the scowl expressed in her eyes and walked over with a hypocritical grin. Greg was happy to see that Dunn felt happy with Olivia and that Olivia had no negative feelings. He knew Olivia was a sensible kid. After chatting for a while, the sophisticated Greg spoke up. "Dunn, I have a social engagement to go to and I'm going to leave. How about I let Olivia talk with you for a period?" All being said and done, Dunn naturally nodded his head. After Greg left, Dunn glanced at Olivia's long, thin, and naked calves. Lust and a desire to ravage burst out from his eyes. However, he still had the attitude of an elder on his face and picked up his chopsticks to give her food. "Olivia, have some food." Olivia put down her chopsticks and acted smart, innocent, and straightforward. "Mr. Dunn, my father has already told me the details. If I make you satisfied, will you really let my father get that land?" "That's for sure." Dunn patted his chest. Olivia was happy on the outside, but she wasn't quite convinced, and Dunn didn't look very trustworthy. She picked up the bag she'd put aside and said, deftly, "I have consulted some people. I heard you like schoolgirls, so I've prepared a set of clothes. How about I go to change my clothes and show you?" His own quirks were poked into plain sight, but Dunn was, under no circumstances, embarrassed to see Olivia so sensible. He nodded even, "Okay, you are so thoughtful." Olivia looked at Dunn's lustful face and resisted the urge to punch him in the face, getting up and going to the bathroom to change. After 10 minutes, Olivia returned. Dunn looked over expectantly, and when he saw Olivia's costume, he instantly stared at it, with his face turning white. Dunn was shocked that the hairs on his head even stood on end in shock. Olivia took a few steps forward, causing a plea from Dunn. "Stop, stay back." His pupils grew dilated, and he slumped in his chair, unable to move. "Mr. Dunn, it's me. What's wrong with you?" Dunn gathered her wits and made a swallowing motion as he looked at Olivia. He turned his sight away and said disgustedly, "Go and get your clothes changed." Olivia looked down at her dress, a coldness crossing her eyes. She felt a picture in her pocket. "Don't you like it? I was dressed specifically after this girl, and I thought you would like it." In the photo, a young and positive girl is standing on the basketball court, gesturing to the camera with a yup pose. On the back of the photo is a name, Haley. When Dunn saw the photo instead, he calmed down and looked glumly at Olivia. "What do you want to do?" She dressed up as Haley and clearly had no good intentions. "You paid off doctors, changed medical records, destroyed all the evidence evidence and ended a young girl's life with impunity. Olivia squeezed the photo in her hand, with a fury rising in her eyes. Did you really think you could just hide it from the world? So what? You're pissed off and now you're scaring me with a picture. Dunn snorted. Since I'm here today, I can't let you down. Olivia raised a chesty smile, pulled out her phone, handed it over, and then, with a satisfied look, stared at Dunn's look, which got worse. You thought you could rest easy by paying to destroy the medical records. You eliminated the originals and forgot there was such a thing named backup. Olivia brought the phone over and proceeded to fling out another thing that could crush Dunn. Besides that, I have got a piece of evidence, Haley's clothing. She wore it before she died. There's a lot of residue on it, so you know what that means. Haley was ravaged to death because of Dunn's perverted desire. She was all but dead in his bed. When Haley at that time was brought to the hospital, she was on her last breath. Her lower body was ravaged ghastly and the nurse changed her clothes. Then Haley was forced to be transferred to a hospital bribed by Dunn, who ended her life with an accidental death. Dunn didn't expect that someone would find such hard evidence after all the time. Olivia was sitting in the chair across from Dunn. After gathering her morale, she spoke. You've seen these things. Next, it's our turn to negotiate. Something in Olivia's hand determined Dunn's lifeblood. With his life at stake, Dunn had already lost his lust for Olivia. Dunn got up, poured Olivia a glass of water, and said kindly, Olivia, after all these years, I have realized that I was wrong. However, people who passed away is dead. We have no chance to get her back. If I get caught, it won't do you any good. So, what do you want? Go ahead. What I want is simple. Just carry on what you promised my father. Dunn clenched his fists a little uneasily. That land, he wasn't really sure. Even though the director of the Land and Resources Bureau is his brother-in-law, but it didn't mean he would show favoritism just because of their good relationship. He was only saying those words to deceive Greg to send Olivia over. Olivia could probably tell what Dunn was thinking, but she didn't care. She played with her phone, made a threat, and said, Is it hard? That's fine. I'm sure the police will be interested in what I have in my hand. Dunn was busy responding, Fine, I'm sure you'll get what you want. Olivia looked at the time and got up to leave. She was almost to the door when she thought of something. Then she turned away and gave another comment with a smile. Wait, I'm not on good terms with my stepmother and stepsister. I'm guessing there's someone my mother and sister sent over here. If you could help me vent my anger, it would be great. Considering Carol's calculating, how could she not return a gift to Carol and Jessica? The following day, Olivia returned to the White family in the evening. As soon as Carol saw her, Carol smiled and cared for her like a hypocrite. In contrast, Jessica was a little more outrageous. Her parents' scowl and sarcasm on display were easy to see. Olivia, as if she hadn't seen it, was seated nicely at the table and enjoyed her dinner. At the halftime of the meal, Dunn called Greg, who was busy answering the phone after seeing the name. Greg listened to Dunn until the phone was hung up. He replied as usual, Well, I'm clear. Keep in touch. After hanging up the phone, Greg was kind enough to serve Olivia with food. Olivia, take it. Look at you. How skinny you are. Thanks, Dad. Olivia was apparently happy, but just tossed the bowl of food with her chopsticks instead of sending it into the mouth. She had no hope of fatherhood when Greg had planned to send her to Dunn's bed. She would have been flattered if Greg had put food in her mouth, but now, she just felt sick. Jessica saw her father was concerned with Olivia. She poked at the rice unhappily and glared at Olivia on the quiet. You are just a bitch and nothing deserves your complacent. Dad wouldn't even look at you if you weren't noticed by Dunn and somewhat useful now. After a while, Greg saw Olivia put down her chopsticks and said to her, You must be tired from school today. Go back to your room and have a rest when you are full. Sure. Olivia was obedient and left. After Olivia's figure disappeared from the stairway, Greg's benevolent smile withdrew and his face darkened instantly. As he rose to his feet, he slapped Carol so hard that the force of the slap sent Carol from his chair to the floor. Carol was blindsided by the unexpected slap and sat on the floor while covering her face. Dad, what are you doing? Jessica panicked and went to help her mother. Shut up, you got everything wrong. Greg looked at Jessica gloomily. Jessica had never been treated this way by Greg before and reached the top of her frustration, sticking her neck out and talking back to Greg. What? Mom and I are in a good manner, but Olivia doesn't serve men well. You're taking it out on us. Greg almost lost his voice in one breath and said angrily, What the fuck are you talking about, asshole? Carol hurried up to pull Jessica's arm, telling her to keep her mouth shut. Greg is the authority of the family and loves to save face. He had betrayed Olivia for the company, and everyone was better to keep silent than to make it public. If Jessica undermined his authority, he couldn't maintain his reputation, and his anger would be even greater. Jessica was familiar with her father's temper. She bit her lip, not daring to speak again. Greg snorted. I heard that you guys sent someone to the South Resort last night. He heard Dunn's hint of discontent from the phone. He had thought that Olivia had done something wrong, but it turned out that Carol and Jessica were a hindrance to him. Dunn said that it wouldn't be over if Olivia hadn't been sensible enough to talk him out of it. Carol and Jessica both froze at Greg's questioning. They did secretly send someone to film Olivia and Dunn's video, but the security system at the South Resort was so strict that they didn't film anything at last. Carol hurried to explain it, but Greg didn't listen to her at all. No need to explain. I'm well aware of that. Greg wasn't stupid. It could be easily seen through that Carol and Jessica's behavior was directed at Olivia. You are not allowed to go out for a few days. Just think about your mistakes at home. Olivia is my daughter. If you put up with her, by no means, just get the hell out of here. If you dare to do any vicious things in the future, I will not let you off. Greg spoke the harsh words and went out in a huff. Jessica couldn't recover for a long time. She never expected that her father would kick them out because of Olivia. Carol's face was swollen and numb with pain, but she still patted her daughter's hand first to comfort Jessica. Your father is just angry. No need to be afraid of. Jessica sniffled and helped Carol up. Mom, just sit down and I'll put your medicine on. Upstairs, Olivia listened to the movement downstairs and went back to her room. She was much satisfied. After suppressing Dunn and teaching a lesson to Carol and Jessica, Olivia didn't return to the White family anymore. Just in time for the May Day holiday, she stayed at Vincent's house. She played with Zach every day, followed the latest dramas, and had such a good time for the first time. As noon approached, Olivia walked over to the kitchen, looked at the busy cook and Gbert, and kindly went over to them. She took a bowl of unwashed vegetables from Gbert's hands and said, I'll do it and give you a hand. Then, madam, how about join me in trimming vegetables for cooking? Olivia's eyes lit up. Good. Thinking of something, she looked to Gbert and whispered, about Vincent. Who did he learn to cook from? Olivia hadn't forgotten Vincent's cooking since that time, but usually, nothing would bother him to cook, and she didn't dare to let him cook, so she had to suppress her desire. Second master's cooking? Are you kidding me? How could the second master cook? Gbert looked as if he had heard the Arabian Nights. Olivia was stunned. Gbert said seriously, the second master is a serious germaphobe. He never goes into the kitchen. Since he was usually followed by servants, there is no need for him to cook. In the meantime, Olivia was wondering and lowering her head in contemplation when Gbert suddenly stood up and greeted in the direction behind her. Second master. She turned around and saw Vincent a short distance away. Vincent looked to her and gave her a curt command. You get prepared. We'll take Zach to the hospital after dinner. Olivia immediately got up from the chair and asked anxiously, to the hospital? What happened to Zach? Don't worry. It's the problem that he is unable to talk, Vincent said reassuringly when he saw Olivia looking so worried. Olivia was relieved. That's it. Vincent had seen Zach's past diagnoses that were divided on the explanations for his condition. Since many a specialist couldn't diagnose and treat him, Vincent thought it over and decided to take Zach to Dr. Clark. Because Olivia was there, Zach was good the whole way. At the hospital, Andy pushed Vincent into Andrew's office and exited. Andrew took a new medical history book and looked up at Olivia. What's wrong with him? Olivia froze for a moment and then quickly said, Zach still can't talk. Let's do a brain CT first and I'll see what's going on. Andrew responded quickly. The brain CT results were available soon. After Andrew looked at them, he asked both Olivia and Vincent, can I have a moment alone with this child? Andrew took Zach to a special room with a large clear glass panel that allowed him to see Vincent and Olivia outside. Olivia saw Andrew lay Zach down on a soft couch. He took out a pocket watch, put it in front of Zach, and waggled it a few times. Is Dr. Clark hypnotizing Zach? Olivia asked the man beside her uneasily. Vincent gave a curt yes and looked pale. Andrew's medical skills are among the best in the business. The fact that he acted this way meant that Zach was mentally ill for his inability to speak. After about half an hour, Andrew came out of the room and shook his head. It's a little tricky. Olivia's heart sank to the bottom like a stone. Is it incurable? No, I'm just a little confused. Andrew looked to Vincent. You probably have taken him to other doctors. Zach's speech system is fine. He has a well-developed brain and should be very smart, which means that it's easy for him to talk, but he probably doesn't want. That's why I hypnotized him. It turns out that he really can't talk rather than he doesn't want to. Olivia listened intently, wondering, isn't that a contradiction? Yes, that's the problem, the contradiction. What's the reason for the contradiction? If we can find out the reason, we can cure him. Vincent didn't realize how complicated Zach's illness was and asked Andrew, do you have a treatment plan now? Andrew laughed bitterly and shook his head. No, without knowing the cause. There is no way to do anything about it. The atmosphere was a little stagnant for a moment. When Olivia looked over at Zach, who was still asleep, her heart was aching and sore, her lips were moving, and she was almost crying. In her mind, Zach was the most wonderful kid in the world, but if it went on forever, Zach would be a dud. He would suffer from people's strange looks and be isolated by others. No, absolutely not. Olivia grabbed Andrew's hand and said urgently, Dear Clark, find a way please. Save Zach. I'm begging you. Andrew said softly in a reassuring voice to the family member. I'll always be up for it, but healing doesn't happen overnight. Zach is normal in every way, so maybe when he grows up, he'll be able to talk on his own. Vincent motionlessly pulled Olivia's hands away from Andrew's and faintly talked to Olivia. Don't worry. One day he will be fine, and children from the Barton family are not so fragile. He was not as pessimistic as Olivia. Tribulation is not necessarily a bad thing, for the phoenix is more more eye-catching when it's reborn in nirvana. Olivia looked at Vincent for a long moment and then said solemnly, "So you, as well, should try to stand up and make an example for Zach." Vincent nodded with a natural expression. As they were leaving the hospital, Olivia caught a glimpse of a figure and stopped in her tracks. Vincent looked back and said, "What's wrong?" Olivia put Zach on Vincent's laps and replied, "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be back soon. You guys wait in the car." About 10 minutes later, Olivia returned. Vincent saw her expression as usual and said nothing. She had obviously seen someone just now and chased after, but he didn't interfere with her actions. As long as she could protect herself, he would be satisfied. As Olivia gave Vincent a routine leg massage in the evening, she squeezed the muscles in his leg. Then she asked, "Have you felt better lately? Can you feel your legs?" Vincent flipped through the book and tried to answer no, but when he looked up, he saw a pair of eyes full of hope and bright as stars. The words then turned into a little bit. "Really?" said Olivia, who pulled up her pitch and was very excited. "Well, but only a little bit," Vincent replied with deliberate emphasis as he saw her, whose reaction seemed to say he can stand up. "It's not bad. It means we're on the right track with the treatment. Keep going and one day you'll be on your feet." Olivia was afraid he would get discouraged and quickly cheered him up. Vincent kept reminding himself that Olivia was just trying to get him to grant her a wish, but his heart couldn't help but grow soft. Although he had lied to her, what she did every day was not useless. His legs still didn't walk exactly like a normal person because he was too eager to get up, where he put a lot of strain on his injured legs and feet together. As a result, his tendons weren't recovering well. At the juncture, Olivia's weekday care had been just enough of a relief. If he walked slowly at the moment, outsiders could not see the defect. Because of Vincent's words, Olivia felt as if she had gotten a kick out of it and was working even harder. As they chatted with one another, Olivia pursed her lips and asked the question she had buried in her heart for a long time. Zach's parents let Zach stay here, and didn't they call to see how Zach was doing? If Zach had been her child, she would never leave him out abroad for so long. Vincent was silent for a moment. Where Olivia had thought of it all, he had naturally thought of it already. He had asked his grandfather about these things some time ago. Grandpa said that Chris Clark and his wife are getting a divorce recently, and no one wants to attend Zach. Olivia stared. No one wants to attend Zach? How could they do it? Zach is so nice. Even if they get divorced, they should be fighting for him. Vincent didn't speak. In the next second, it dawned on Olivia that Zach was defective, and that was the reason his parents didn't want him. Having been together for so long, Vincent had come to think of Zach as part of the family, despite his cold feelings. He could understand how upset Olivia was, so he placed his hand on the top of her head and rubbed it comfortingly. "Don't worry. Zach and Chris weren't close, and Grandpa wasn't going to send Zach back. But Zach would have no parents." Olivia didn't take it easy. When looking at Olivia's lonely sideways face, he said gently, "I assure you, none of this will happen to Zach." And soon, he showed the household register to Olivia. When Olivia saw the contents on it, she immediately became silly. Zach's account is in Vincent's name. The relationship to head of household column says firstborn. Zach is Vincent's child now. "Now you don't have to worry," Vincent said with his chin on his fist. "I don't worry about it anymore. I'm sure you'll be a wonderful father," said Olivia, who was quick to flatter Vincent. Olivia squeezed the household register and exclaimed, "Vincent, you are going to be a father." Vincent almost spurted out of the mouthful of water he had just taken. If he didn't know what happened, he would think she was pregnant.